Man, oh man. Another day, another podcast. Episode 5. It's gonna be a good one. I'm glad to be back. From Thursday night coverage to Week 8 waivers, we're gonna cover it all here on today's show. So without further ado, welcome to the Anomaly Podcast. I'm your host, Owen Stiftar. Let's get into it. This Thursday night, which is tonight, the Baltimore Ravens at 4-3 head into Raymond James Stadium to take on the struggling but 3-4 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The spread right now sits at Baltimore 1.5. The over/under 45 points. We'll get into that later. And for what it's worth, the star quarterbacks in this matchup, obviously we're talking Lamar Jackson and Tom Brady. They have only played once before, and that was back in 2019, Brady's last year in New England. The Lamar and the Ravens won 37-20. Lamar had 224 total yards, 3 total touchdowns, 2 on the ground. Brady, not too bad of a game himself. 285 passing yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Obviously, Brady didn't get the win there. But nonetheless, we'll start with the Ravens because they are the road team. We always do that. They're coming off of a much needed win, division win at that, against Cleveland last week. And after missing all of last season and the first 6 games of this season, it was good to see Gus Edwards make his return, make his debut, I guess so to speak, this season, coming off of that devastating knee injury. And he looked great. We'll obviously talk about him later for the Week 8 waivers, just a sneak peek, but he looked good in his return. He's still big all around, but it looks like he hasn't lost a step. I'll put it that way, right? So it's always good to see him come back, especially from a knee injury. We've seen a lot of great running backs digress or go out on that injury. So it's always good to see him come back and be, well, it looks like at the same level. Rashad Bateman, receiver for the Ravens, also made his return last week. He returned and he also looked pretty good. Now, obviously, the Ravens aren't a passing offense, so his stats are never going to be there. But nonetheless, you see his impact on the team. It opens up their offense. And for Mark Andrews having the worst game we've seen him have in a long time, it didn't matter because Bateman was back. He was able to pick up some slack. Same with Devin Duvernay. And, to no one's surprise, the Ravens have played to their strengths so far. They like to run the ball. And right now they have the 5th ranked rushing offense in the NFL, excuse me. Because of that, Lamar is at his strengths. He's playing to what he does best, and he's an MVP candidate because of it. However, in their 4-3 record, the Ravens have led in every single game. They've led by double digits in every single game this season. So all 7 of their games, they have led by double digits at some point in time. So to only have 4 wins, that has to hurt, you know. But their defense still isn't playing the greatest, especially their secondary. Last year, that was their biggest flaw in their whole team. Obviously, last year they had a lot of injuries and COVID, but this year it hasn't changed. And with playing a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that have Mike Evans and have Chris Godwin, teams that have elite wide receivers, their secondary could cost them this game. That's one thing we want to throw out there. But not to mention, Baltimore is on the road, and they're taking on a frustrated Tom Brady, who in his legendary career is 10-1 on Thursday night games. We'll transition here to the Buccaneers. We'll start on their highs. Tom Brady, he enters this game as a home underdog for only the 13th time in his entire legendary career. Obviously, he's the greatest of all time. So to enter as a home underdog for the 13th time, obviously, uh, that's not usual for Tom Brady. But in those 13 games, or 12 games, I guess, he's 9-3, and he's, like I mentioned, 10-1 in Thursday night games overall for his career. On the plus side, also, there's plenty of time to turn this around for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They have the talent on both sides of the ball. We already know this. It's no secret to the average fan. They have the talent. Their defense is still very talented. They just have to put everything together, right? On offense, you have the dynamic wideouts in Mike Evans, in Chris Godwin. You have the big bruising back in Fournette that can do pretty much a little bit of everything. But now, with the injuries to the O line before the season, obviously the biggest blow was All Pro Ryan Jensen, their center. That was a worry. Their O line was a worry coming into the season, and it's shown throughout the season, right? It's been their biggest it's been their biggest hurdle, I'll put it that way, that they've had to overcome. And overall, it's been very difficult for this offense to work around. But at the end of the day, you still have Tom Brady. You still have the greatest football player of all time to ever exist ever. So there's plenty of time for this team to turn it around. I do also want to mention that there is power in having continuity within your team, and especially in the offensive unit. So, like I said, plenty of time to turn it around. However, we all know that Father Time is undefeated. Usually, if we see Tom Brady on prime time, whether if it's in the regular season or playoffs, or heck, preseason, we're picking Tom Brady in whatever team he's on, right? Unfortunately, Tom Brady hasn't played this season, we'll say. Tom Brady hasn't played like Tom Brady. The Buccaneers offense has looked mostly broken, and I'm not convinced that on a short week it could be fixed. It would more so be in the next coming weeks, but nonetheless, Thursday night, which is tonight, uh, today could be a good starting point to get things in the right direction. On top of everything that we've said so far, their defense can't stop the run this season. That's unlike the Bucs defense in the Tom Brady era, but their defense can't stop the run, and when you're facing a team like the Ravens, that's a weakness you cannot have. So that's your Thursday night. With everything being said, uh, give me the Baltimore Ravens on the road. I expect them to keep it moving, and maintain first place over the Bengals and the Browns, which I guess they technically have a shot this week. They're going to stay on top of the AFC North, take down the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Thursday night. Um, that's what's going to happen. Last week, overall, we did kind of just make our first pick of the week. But for picks of the week, which we're going to transition to now, last week I had a 7-7 record overall this year. It's 13-15. So, not the greatest. We're under 500. But just like the Buccaneers, we have plenty of time to turn that around. We'll start here in London, where Denver at 2-5 is going to take on the 2-5 Jacksonville Jaguars. And I will say for this matchup, there's a few guarantees in life. You have death, you have taxes, and the Jacksonville Jaguars playing in London. It seems like every single year the Jags have played in London since they've brought it back. I want to say 2018 was when that was. Seems like they've played in London each and every season. Maybe it's because of their location, but whatever it is, the Jags are 3-4 in their history in London games, and they have played the most London games out of any team throughout the NFL. Like I said, it's most likely their location because they're probably the closest to London out of any NFL team. But regardless, they had a tough loss last week versus the Giants. If you're not aware, Trevor Lawrence led the offense down into the red zone. It was the last couple seconds of the game. Trevor Lawrence had the 5-1 Giants at the time on their heels, and he threw a skinny post to Christian Kirk. He caught it. Unfortunately, though, he was 1 yard short. Uh, um, it reminded me a lot of. This is going to be a throwback for a lot of you guys, but there was a game I want to say in 2011 where the Saints at the time they obviously had Drew Brees and Jimmy Graham. They played the 49ers, who at the time had Alex Smith, Vernon Davis, Frank Gore, Patrick Willis, those legendary teams. It was the NFC divisional round, I believe. And Drew Brees threw, it looked like the same play. He threw a skinny post to Jimmy Graham, but Jimmy Graham had a defender on his back, and the ball just didn't cross the plane. He was 1 yard short. Christian Kirk, in this scenario for the Jags, it looked like the same exact play. He caught it, he had a defender on his back. The ball just didn't cross the plane, and he ended up being 1 yard short. Tough loss for the Jags last week, but hey, they just traded James Robinson, obviously, to the Jets for a later round pick. They're really giving the keys to Travis Etienne, their first round pick last season. He will continue to be a big part in this offense. Expect more touches than ever this week for Travis Etienne. The Buccaneers are hoping to get Russell Wilson back in this game after his hamstring injury. Last week, nothing has changed with their offense. They still came out and had a very pitiful offensive performance. Will the addition of Russell Wilson really matter? Probably not, knowing how this offense has played this season. But who knows, you know? I mean, maybe that hamstring injury will lead to a resurgence in this Denver Broncos offense. It's always fun to mention also that it was reported, I'll say this, Russell Wilson was doing high knees and jumping jacks on the Denver Broncos plane to London. He's reportedly for 3 hours. So, one, I can't imagine somebody doing high knees in the middle of the aisle on an airplane. Nonetheless, it was your quarterback. So, that's funny to mention. Nonetheless, Russell Wilson's funny. First 1 o'clock game we're going to have on Sunday. We're going to cover the 4-3 Miami Dolphins. They're heading into Detroit to take on the 1-5 struggling Detroit Lions. Tua came back last week and he looked okay at best. Sure, statistically he may have been there. I believe he had 260 for a touchdown. But you could tell, right? He needs more time to get comfortable again, get over that mental hurdle he probably still has. And, it's good to see him back nonetheless. I expect the old Miami offense to return this week. I expect Tua to be back to where he was the first couple of weeks of the season. And hey, on Detroit's side of things, especially with the many health issues that they have had to start this season, Swift has been out with multiple nagging injuries. He looked great when he played, but obviously he's been out for a couple weeks now with multiple injuries. Amon-Ra last week had the first catch of the day. It looked like he was going to have a big day, but he had a concussion also. He was out. Amon-Ra and DeAndre Swift, I'll put it this way, they're both expected to play this week. So that's always good news for them, especially playing a Miami team. But unfortunately, DJ Chark last week was also placed on IR. IR obviously is 4 to 6 weeks, so he'll be out. So with the injuries that Detroit has and the resurgence of this Miami offense with Tua coming back, give me Miami on the road taking down Detroit. Carolina and Atlanta here. Carolina's 2-5, and nothing sums up this crazy NFL season more than what Carolina is doing right now. They traded away their best offensive player in Christian McCaffrey. They fired their coach, Matt Rule, and they're down to their third option at quarterback, PJ Walker. So, hey, but they could be in first place after this week, or heading into week 9. So next week, if they can win this game against Atlanta, who's coming off of a tough loss last week versus Cincinnati. Atlanta, the problem in that game, they just looked outmatched from start to finish. Mariota, even though they were down multiple scores, he only had 13 total passes. And Cincinnati, their offense was just clicking on all cylinders. So for most teams, there's not much you could do when that happens, right? But Atlanta, they just love to run the ball. And obviously, you can tell they don't trust Mariota in the air. However, for this matchup, we all know that Atlanta loves to run the ball. And one thing Carolina cannot stop is the run. I believe Atlanta can run their way to first place in this division with a Baltimore win on Thursday night and a win here against Carolina. Give me Atlanta at home to take first place in the NFC South. Next up, we're going to have the 3-4 Arizona Cardinals uh, going into Minnesota to take on the 5-1 Minnesota Vikings. Arizona is coming off of a Thursday night win. They're gonna be plenty rested, so that's always a good thing. D Hop looked amazing. Obviously, if you're not aware, he returned last week, saved a lot of fantasy managers. We'll throw that out there. But he looked amazing. I believe he had 10 catches for over 100 yards, so it doesn't look like he's missed a beat. Arizona's defense also looked surprisingly good, despite giving up a lot of points to an Andy Dalton led offense in 2022. But nonetheless, in this matchup specifically for Arizona, if they want to win this game, Kyler Murray, he's going to have to use his legs, and I believe his running ability, with the addition of D Hop now to the offense, they should be able to give the Vikings defense fits. We'll put it that way. For the Vikings, they're coming off of a bye. They're off to a 5-1 start, which is the first time since 2016 that they've started off this well. And obviously, I believe in 2016 was the year they had Case Keenum and Stephon Diggs at the time. That was obviously the year they had that crazy Hail Mary, which was unfortunate because I am a Drew Brees fan. Regardless, last week, like I said, they had a bye week, which was much needed for a lot of their star players. A lot of their star players needed to get rest. They needed to get healthy for the long run. And with expecting all of Minnesota's stars to come out and be healthy for this game, I'm expecting them all to have a good game. So Justin Jefferson, Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, not so much Adam Thielen anymore, but the big three, Jay Jettas, Dalvin Cook, Kirk Cousins. I'm expecting them all to come out and have a pretty good week. I expect this matchup to be a high-scoring game, but surprisingly, I'm going to give the edge to Arizona. Maybe it's a 34-31 game or a 34-30 game. Comes down to a field goal or a late touchdown. Give me Arizona on the road. They're going to keep rolling with D Hop back in the offense. Next up, the 3-4 Chicago Bears, which will be interesting to talk about. They're going into Dallas to take on the 5-2 Cowboys. The Bears impressed with their win last Monday night over the Patriots. It was a game that shocked every NFL fan, to say the least. But this will be another test for their young offense facing the Dallas defense, who might be the best in the NFL. I'm sure not statistically they are, but when you watch them, they look like the most dominant defense, and it's going to give this Bears offense another big test. The biggest question for this Bears team is, can they stop the Dallas rushing attack? Obviously, we're not sure about Zeke's health in this game quite yet, but Dallas loves to run the ball. And with recently trading away Robert Quinn to the Eagles, which we'll get into a little bit later, can they stop the run? For Dallas, Dak returned to action last week for the first time since week 1. It was rough, I'll say that, but they beat the depleted Lions team. Nonetheless, they won by a couple scores. This Dallas team, I'm expecting them to run in this game early and often, especially against the Bears team. They should get up early, and after they get up early, they should just be managing the clock for the majority of the game. That's going to help Dak come back. Obviously, he's still adjusting to playing again. He's been out for 4 to 5 weeks. So, Dak, they're going to run early often. With the Bears off of a short week as well, I might add. This may get ugly and relatively quickly. Give me Dallas at home. No surprise there. Next up, we're going to have the 2-4 Las Vegas Raiders going into New Orleans to take on the 2-5 New Orleans Saints. The Raiders did some good things against the Texans last week, and then the key word is some. They didn't have an overall great game. They just played an inferior opponent, which is crazy to say, saying the Raiders are 2-4. But regardless, they're facing the Saints on the road, which will be a better team, obviously, than the Houston Texans last week. For the Raiders, aside from Devontae Adams being himself and Josh Jacobs upping his market for this offseason, obviously the Raiders don't want to resign Josh Jacobs. So it's good to see Josh Jacobs going out there, upping his value, and hopefully he gets a big contract this offseason. But besides those two guys, the offense has been poor, the defense has been poor. They've just been a struggle all around. For New Orleans side of things, they should be well rested, obviously, like Arizona, coming off of a game last Thursday. Though they lost, they should have some injured players back. Michael Thomas is expected to be back. Obviously, Alvin Kamara will be there. Chris Olave will be there. Jameis Winston will be there. So they should have a lot of their offensive firepower back this week. And nonetheless, the Saints defense, even though they haven't been good this season, with all the stars returning on offense, with them being able to play at their pace on offense, right? Not so many three and outs. I expect this game to be a game where the Saints defense can bounce back and they can get back to where we know they can be. And so basically, it's a game they can turn it around, flip the script, so to speak. Give me New Orleans at home, taking down the traveling Raiders. Next up, we're going to have the 2-5 Pittsburgh Steelers going into Philly to take on these undefeated Philadelphia Eagles. The Battle of Pennsylvania features a Steelers team that's playing a second straight road game against obviously, the lone undefeated Philadelphia Eagles team that's going to be fresh. They're coming off of a bye. No secret that the Eagles have the huge advantage in this game. If, not that they need one, but nonetheless, with them coming off of a bye, with them looking as dominant as they have, on offense, on defense this season. They just traded for Robert Quinn. They saw what Robert Quinn did against the New England Patriots on Monday night. And they're like, you know what? Let's add to already our stacked team. So this is what it takes, to win a championship. You need to sacrifice your future. Obviously, they only gave up a fourth round pick for Robert Quinn, but nonetheless, it's a fourth round pick. You need to go out there and you need to trade for players and prepare for the offseason. Obviously, injuries can happen at any moment. This Eagles team realizes they have a contender on their hand. And no surprise here, I'm going to take Philly at home against against probably Kenny Pickett and the Steelers offense. Give me the Eagles. Next up, we're going to have the 3-4 New England Patriots, who have some questions that need to be answered. They're on the road to take on the 5-2 New York Jets. It's so weird to see New England struggling. I know last year they kind of had a year like this. I know they turned it around second half of the year, but with them having Tom Brady for all of those years, being a team that you don't want on your schedule, to being a team that's below 500, it's crazy to see a team that was dominant for so long be mediocre now. But regardless, they're playing on a short week. They played awful last Monday, a couple days ago, in their loss to the Bears. They let the Bears offense, who struggled all season, drop 30 plus points. And, that should tell you pretty much all you need to know about that game in general. But some positive notes about the Patriots. Bill Belichick has named a starter. He named Mac Jones the starting quarterback. We already know that Bailey Zapp will be on deck, so to speak. So if anything does go wrong, it seems like they have two quarterbacks that can manage this offense and can get them a win if need be. So, but nonetheless, Mac Jones is their starting quarterback. That was expected. Regardless of who their quarterback is, I'll put it this way. We know the Patriots' formula to winning games at this point in the year, and that's to run the ball a lot and play good defense. So it's one of those plans that, if worked to perfection, you're going to win every game. But that's the problem, is it's not always easy to do those things. Playing obviously depends on your matchup. We'll get into the Jets here. This might be a game that is very lackluster, but the Jets are back to back, or they're back at home, I'll put it that way, after two straight road games that they both won. So good for the Jets. Um, they got the unfortunate news that obviously Brees Hall, rookie running back, he was on pace to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. He tore his ACL. He will be out for the season, but they just went out and they traded for James Robinson, who's a formidable running back. Obviously, he's established in this league. James Robinson's coming off of his own knee injury, but James Robinson's looked okay this year when he's gotten the ball, so that's always good. Um, it's going to be Michael Carter, who's a early round pick just 2 years ago out of UNC, obviously, and it'll be a Michael Carter James Robinson backfield. I do believe that the Brees Hall injury will affect this team in the long run. Just his dynamic playmaking ability, rather, but not this week. Uh, I believe the Jets at home, even though Belichick has uh, a good history against Zach Wilson and rookie quarterbacks at that, or younger quarterbacks at that. I don't believe it'll change anything this week. Give me the Jets at home. Jets keep rolling. 4-2 Tennessee Titans are on the road to take on the 1-4-1 Houston Texans. The Titans have taken command of the AFC South, and they're going to head into Houston this week to play the Texans. They're coming off of a big victory against the Colts, another division matchup here this week, and their defense has looked better and better each week, so that's always a good thing for a team that wants to contend, that wants to be somewhat relevant. And despite having Robert Woods as their best receiver, they're 4-2. So that says something. For Houston's side of things, they've showed some improvement on offense. Davis Mills did have an okay week last week. He's been playing better, I'll put it that way. I'm not the biggest fan of Davis Mills, but he's been playing better. I will give him his flowers there. But the offense still relies solely on Damian Pierce, which might not be a bad way to go, but to put your whole offense on a rookie, it's not a recipe for success. And for that reason alone, with Tennessee's defense looking better and with King Henry getting his feet back under him, getting back to his old self, give me Tennessee on the road. No surprise there. Next up, we'll possibly have the game of the week. The 6-1 New York Giants are heading into Seattle to take on the 4-3 Seahawks. Big news here, obviously, is DK Metcalf will be out this week with a concussion, or at least he's heavily doubted. I don't believe he's been ruled out yet, but he will be. So don't expect DK Metcalf out there this week. I don't know how it happened, but after falling off of the face of the earth for nearly 6 years, um, not only has Geno Smith reemerged, but he's playing the best football of his life for the Seattle team. So even though DK Metcalf will be out, the reemergence of Geno Smith, something I never thought I would say, that's going to give them a shot in this game, right? With Tyler Lockett, with Ken Walker playing as good as he has, this offense still has a shot. Both teams are coming off of impressive wins. I actually predicted both to lose last week, so that's there. It is interesting to state for the Giants side of things that they are the only team in NFL history to start 6-1 or better and have all of their games decided by one possession. Last week, obviously, they took down the Jags. Their defense stepped up in that last drive, holding the Jags out of the end zone. So that's always impressive. The interesting thing about this game is that both teams love to run the ball. That's no secret, but neither of them can stop the run. So I don't. Weirdly enough, in games like this, you would think both teams it would just turn into a running contest. I think the opposite will happen. I think this will be the most underrated game of Week 8, and I think it's going to be a shootout. This game's going to end with Geno Smith, I believe, taking down this seemingly unbeatable Giants team. And give me the Seahawks at home with the 12th man. I'm going to stop disrespecting Geno Smith and the Seattle team. This Giants team, one thing they do know how to do, they do know how to close games. I just don't see it happening. On the road, you have Daniel Jones. Give me Seattle at home. Next up, we're going to have Washington as we're winding down here for the Sunday games. Washington at 3-4, taking on the 3-1 Indianapolis Colts. This matchup here can be summed up with Taylor Heineke versus Sam Ehlinger. It's the matchup we've all been waiting for. Obviously, I'm joking there, but Washington side of things, they had a big win last week against Green Bay. It's also funny to see that on their game sealing throw, there's a picture that went viral. Taylor Heineke, when he was hit on that throw, his eyes were closed. So his eyes were closed, and he threw a beautiful ball down the sideline to McLaurin, who came back to make a play on it. Obviously, that was the game sealing throw. They had a big win last week against the Packers. The Commanders have won 2 straight, and their defense has continuously played better, despite not having Chase Young, one of their best defensive players out there. On the Colts side of things, they will play Sam Ehlinger for the rest of the season. He's a rookie they drafted a couple years ago, and with Matt Ryan, some of this is Matt Ryan being hurt, and some of this is just him being benched. So it's a combination of the two. Ehlinger, unlike Matt Ryan, he has some mobile. He has some mobility. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Kyler Murray, but he has some mobility, kind of like an Aaron Rodgers, right? Um, and with the offensive struggles, a big thing with Matt Ryan is that he's not mobile, and obviously we've seen a lot of health issues with this Colts offensive line, and just their production, their play overall has been terrible this season. So Ehlinger's ability to move around is always going to help a team with a struggling offensive line like the Colts. So it'll be interesting to see Sam Ehlinger out there. Obviously, not many people know much about him. We're going to see what he's really made of. But Jonathan Taylor, he will also be back for his second week. So you can only assume he will be better. I can only assume he's going to get a lot of touches this week in the passing game and the running game. You know, the best friends of a young quarterback are a reliable tight end and a reliable running back. So for a quarterback that doesn't have much experience, expect Mo Alley Cox, Kylan Granson, Jack Doyle, and Jonathan Taylor to get a lot of work in this game. Next up, we're going to have an NFC West matchup. The 3-4 San Francisco 49ers go into Los Angeles to take on the 3-3 Los Angeles Rams. For the Niners, these teams played back in week 4. The Niners picked up the win 24-9, and they have now won 7 straight regular season games against the Rams. Obviously, last year the Rams beat the Niners in the NFC title game. So, hey, pick your poison, right? But with CMC now in the fold, getting more and more comfortable in this offense, it's going to be hard for the Rams to come away with this win. Which, hey, let's look at the Rams side of things. It's going to be hard to go against at the same time. Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Cooper Kupp at home. It's going to be hard to say that the Rams coming off of a bye where you saw Cooper Kupp had some ankle issues. Aaron Donald hasn't played the best this season. Same with Jalen Ramsey. So for their 3 best players to all have questions going into the bye week, and just to have a week of rest, or a week to reset and reevaluate things. I believe all 3 of these players are going to come back better than ever, and that might be crazy to say about Cooper Kupp, who's looked amazing. I believe all 3 of those guys are going to come out and have the best weeks of this season. They still have to figure out the Rams we're talking about. They still have to figure out the Cam Akers situation. Obviously, they're trying to trade him. They still just have to find a suitor at this point. I would expect a Rams team or a team that's trying to contend, like the Chiefs maybe, bring in a Cam Akers for a late round pick. Completely unrelated to this particular game before we make our choice, Jalen Ramsey has a podcast now, which everybody does. He was interviewing his teammate, Matt Stafford, obviously the quarterback of the team. He asked Matt Stafford, he was like, which receiver do you prefer to play with? Megatron, who obviously we know is a Hall of Famer, or Cooper Cup? Matt Stafford, he didn't give a direct answer, but he was talking about both. I believe he referred to both of them as toys that you would get out of a box. He described Megatron as, basically your dream toy, the toy that everybody wants. In real life, I mean, he's 6'5", 230, 240, and he can run fast as Tyreek Hill. But he basically said since he won a championship with Cooper Cup, he would prefer Cooper Cup. So it's interesting to see. I understand Matt Stafford's logic. Obviously, he understands a lot more about those two players than any of us. But nonetheless, it was interesting to see him choose Cooper Cup over Calvin Johnson. But with all that being said, give me the Niners on the road. I know you might have thought I would take the Rams coming off of a bye, but give me the Niners in a close one to keep to get back on the right track with CMC. We're on a Sunday night football. Green Bay at 3-4. They're going to head into Buffalo to take on the 5-1 Buffalo Bills. Through 7 weeks, it's become pretty clear that this Packers offense, they have a major flaw, one in particular, and that flaw is their entire offense. From their play calling to health issues to drop issues, their offense has looked abysmal. SAT word of the day. Their offense has looked abysmal to start the season. It's no secret. And really coming into the year, it was one of those situations where you look at the roster from head to toe, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and you just look at it like the talent can pull through. Regardless of the holes that we do have stars. And it's like we believe the talent can pull through and win regardless of our holes. But this start to the season for the Green Bay Packers shows how important that team chemistry is. And it really shows how important those guys that maybe don't get the credit that the stars do, it shows how important they are to the team as a whole. For the Buffalo Bills, and yes, I know there's noise in the background. Um, we'll get over that, right? Bills are 5-1, coming off of a bye, and no secret, they've looked great this season. Josh Allen is the MVP frontrunner, and with their defense looking great, Stephon Diggs has looked great. Gabe Davis should be back this week. Josh Allen and the Bills get the best of Rodgers and the Packers in this matchup. That's going to do it for Sunday night. Last matchup here we're going to cover is the Monday night game where the 2-5 Cleveland Browns head into Cincinnati to take on the 4-3 Cincinnati Bengals. The Battle of Ohio. We'll start with the road team here. If the Browns, yeah, obviously you guys know I'm a Browns fan. If the Browns want any chance to win this division here, they have to win this game. There's just so many issues on the defense, though. All of them go back to Joe Woods, and that's no secret. I don't believe he will have a job if we lose this game. We'll get into that in a second. But they're playing one of the best offensive passing attacks in the league with Joe Burrow at the helm. So it doesn't look too good for the Browns on the road here. But if the Browns lose this week and they're 2-6 going into their bye week, there's going to be a lot of questions. And yes, I know we don't have Deshaun Watson. Yes, I know, we've had health issues. But going into the bye week, if we're 2-6, one, I believe this puts Kevin Stefanski on the hot seat, and it for sure puts our coordinators on the hot seat. I believe, like I said, if we lose this game, Joe Woods is out of here. So I mean, as a Browns fan, I'm kind of hoping for a loss, as crazy as that may sound. But Joe Woods will be out of here. I believe we'll get a new offensive coordinator as well, and I believe it also puts Kevin Stefanski on the hot seat. For a team that has the talent, they should succeed. I believe we should also grade Stefanski on a curve just because of all of the hurdles he's had to deal with. but I believe it does put him on the hot seat. If we're 2-6 and we come out of this bye week, we have Tampa, we have Buffalo coming up. Obviously, those are big matchups before Deshaun Watson returns. I mean, we need to pick up some wins here, and if we're 2-6, most likely we're going to be 2-8 before Watson, or 2-10, or 4-10, or 4-8. We're going to be a struggling ball club before Watson comes back. And if Watson comes back and we still continue to struggle, I don't want to say it, but I wouldn't be shocked if we have a new coach going into next season. Now, on the Bengals side of things, Joe Burrow, I do believe, to this point, is 0-3 against the Browns in his career. He still has not beat Cleveland. I'm sure that will be added motivation for Joe in this game if they needed more. But they've started, obviously, the Bengals started this year on a bit of a Super Bowl hangover. Unlike the Rams, though, they've quickly turned it around. In the last couple weeks, Jamar Chase has looked great. Tyler Boyd has been um, the guy that's kind of gone under the radar on that offense. He doesn't get much publicity. He's a player for fantasy perspectives. I actually hate Tyler Boyd, but he's the lone son hero, right? He's a hero of that offense so far, and they just looked great. I mean, they've gotten Joe Mixon after a struggling start. They've got him going slowly and slowly, giving him more touches throughout the season. And like I mentioned in my first ever podcast of this show, yes, this is now the third week in a row I would go against the Browns. But I'm a Cleveland fan, so I'm going to take the Browns and we're going to win this game. That's the hope, at least. But that's going to do it for picks of the week. Let's transition to our week 8 waivers, and that'll be it before we get out of here. All right, pickups of the week. We have 6 total players, 2 at the quarterback, running back, and wide receiver positions. So let's start with the quarterback. Obviously, it's not the most important position for fantasy, but still important nonetheless. We're going to start off with Deshaun Watson. There's still a ways away. He still has a couple weeks before he returns. But if he's still on the waivers, I would go ahead and make that move now, because as we get closer and closer to Deshaun Watson's return, it's only going to be harder to pick him up, right? But since Deshaun Watson has stepped on an NFL field, what has he done? From a fantasy perspective, he scores points. And the only player comparable from a floor and a ceiling perspective and combination to Deshaun Watson, the only person close is Patrick Mahomes. He's a top 5 quarterback every single year he's played in the NFL. We know the talent that the Browns have, even though they seemingly never show it. Even Brissett, with the struggles that we've had on the offensive side of the ball, Brissett has had his moments, and he's had his times where he has looked good. So you can only imagine what Watson can do to this offense. He can light a fire, and being a top 10 talent at quarterback, it could change everything for this Browns offense. Also, I will say, his first game is back against the Texans, his old team. So you can only imagine he's going to come out guns blazing against the Texans. If you need a quarterback for this week, Daniel Jones, with all the buys for other quarterbacks going on right now, like a Patrick Mahomes, if you needed someone for this week, Daniel Jones is your guy. Pick him up. The Giants have looked great. Despite how much I hate on the Giants on the show so far, unintentionally, by the way, but I have looked down upon on the Giants so far this season. Jones has looked good. He had 100 rushing yards last week, which for fantasy owners is a dream. Daniel Jones he's always been a bit of a unicorn in the fantasy world. But nonetheless, Wan'Dale Robinson, we've talked about him the last couple weeks. He's continued to get better and see more playing time. Maybe we see Kadarius Toney even make a return to the field this week. So that will always be good for the Giants, and especially Daniel Jones. If you needed to know more, he's playing Seattle, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Yes, it's on the road, in the 12 man, you're facing the 12th man, I'll put it that way. Daniel Jones is still a viable option. He still should he could possibly win you your week this week. He's always been a unicorn in fantasy. I believe he shows it yet again here on the road in a game I believe will be a shootout against Seattle. The running back position, arguably the most important position in fantasy football. My first pickup is going to be Gus Edwards. Obviously, you see on your screen, he's rostered in only 44% of leagues. He will 100%, Gus Edwards, be the lead running back for the Baltimore Ravens, with Dobbins being out last week. We thought it would have been more of a split between Gus Edwards and Kenyon Drake, or even Justice Hill getting some touches. But no, I mean, it was strictly Gus Edwards' backfield. And as he gets healthier and healthier, I expect him to get more production each and every week with Dobbins being out. One downfall, though, I will say to Gus Edwards is that he's not a pass catching back. That work will most likely go to a Kenyon Drake or a Justice Hill. But nonetheless, I mean, to be the lead running back in the Ravens offense, which we mentioned earlier was the fifth ranked rushing offense in the league, I can't go wrong with that, as an RB2 or an RB3. So go ahead and pick up Gus Edwards. Next up, we're going to have Dante Foreman. He's rostered in exactly 50% of leagues, and that is my cutoff for these things. So if you're rostered in more than 50%, I will not include you in the pickups of the week. But Dante Foreman, rostered in 50% of leagues. Last week, 15 carries, 118 on the ground. He had a couple catches to go along with it. But for this Panthers offense that we're expecting to be one of the worst offenses in the NFL for the remainder of the season, it will be hard to play Dante Foreman, but on a base level, there's no one to throw to now. With Christian McCaffrey gone, except for DJ Moore, there's no one else to throw to, I'll put it that way. So expect Dante Foreman, even though he's not a pass catching back, expect his catches to go up, especially with their subpar quarterback play. And like I mentioned for Sam Ellinger, a young quarterback or an inexperienced quarterback's best friends are a tight end and a running back. So expect Dante Foreman to get some more work in the passing game. And I will also say, like I mentioned, we expect this to be one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Chuba Hubbard, that will be a big wrench in the Dante Foreman plays, right? So there's always going to be a worry with starting either of these running backs. But nonetheless, I think both running backs are high end RB3s, maybe low end RB2s. I would trust Dante Foreman more than Chuba Hubbard. Last couple pickups of the week, we're going to have Wan'Dale Robinson for the New York Giants, rostered in 29% of leagues. We talked about him last week. We said go get him last week, and even the week before that. So I'm a big Wan'Dale Robinson fan, apparently. But I said get him last week. He went out and he killed it again. He had 8 targets, 6 catches for 50 yards, which if in a standard PPR, that's 11 points. So I mean, it's not going to blow you out the water, but for this part of the season where we have a lot of bye weeks, we have a lot of star receivers on bye. Wan'Dale is I get it. He's not an established name, and with not having the established production behind his name, it's a scary play. I get it. But he has long-term upside. And like I said, he was a pickup last week. He is going to be a questionable start, but with his production the last 2 weeks only going up, I'd be okay if I was in desperate need for a flex play there for Wan'Dale Robinson. The last pickup of the week is Jameson Williams. He's rostered in only 31% of leagues. If you're unaware, it was Detroit's first round pick this year. Jameson Williams is a receiver out of Bama. In Bama's last championship game, the college football playoff title game, He tore his ACL. He was hurt in that game, obviously, and he hasn't played in the NFL quite yet. He's still recovering from that devastating knee injury. But with Amon-Ra dealing with the concussion that he had last week, we don't know how serious the NFL protocol is now. So who knows? I mean, with the concussion, they may keep him out. He's expected to play, but Amon-Ra's had a couple concussions now in his football career. Will those add up? We'll see. But Amon-Ra, he had a concussion last week. Chark is on IR, so he's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. Josh Reynolds, he's had multiple nagging injuries, so it's safe to say Detroit is desperate for playmakers. That's exactly what Jameson Williams is. Um, I won't say he has the upside of a Chris Olave or a Garrett Wilson, obviously other rookie receivers here in the fantasy world, but to hold on to the end of your roster, to pick him up, he should return in the next couple of weeks. Here, Jameson Williams, obviously, we're talking about. He should return in the next couple of weeks. And at this point, like Deshaun Watson, as it gets closer to his return, I believe he will be a hot commodity on the free agent wire. So pick him up now. Get ahead of your opponents in your league. Pick up Jameson Williams. That's going to do it for our pickups of the week. We'll run through it. We have Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, Gus Edwards, Dante Foreman, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Jameson Williams. Let's get to the close. All right, before we get out of here, just want to say that the comments are officially working. Go ahead and drop any questions you may have, whether it's about the show or any debate you want to have. I would prefer to keep it relative to the show, but I'm all for it. I'll try my best to get back to every single comment I can as fast as I can. But if you haven't supported the channel yet and you would like to, go over and follow the Instagram. It's on the screen. We're dropping reminders over there constantly. Subscribe to the channel. Turn post notifications on so you know when we drop. And of course, drop a like. Obviously, if you like what you hear. But that's going to do it for today. Thank you for listening once again. I will see you guys next Tuesday, where I'm not sure what we're going to cover yet, but just like I said last Thursday, there's plenty of stuff to cover. And if I don't have a set plan, it gives me time to think and come up with creative ideas, like the NBA 3-word game. That if you missed it, go check out Tuesday's podcast. It was fun. But nonetheless, it gives me time to think of creative ideas like that. But hey, without further ado, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And good luck to your fantasy teams. Until Tuesday. I love you guys. Take care. I'm out.